Hey everybody. So it is November 1st, the day after Halloween, and I didn't get the chance to put out my final spooky story for the season. I was hoping to do it by Halloween, but whatever. People can watch these anytime they want. So this is my final story. If you didn't watch Spooky Story number 1, 2, and 3, please go to my YouTube page. And watch them so that you're like up to speed with this final story. Now there are other stories that I could have shared that I didn't, that are personal to people that were involved, so I decided not to share all those stories, but maybe someday in the future, if I ever get around to writing a little book or something about it, I could do that and like change names and stuff. But anyway, so if you watch my stories, the farmhouse, which I'm going to make the still for the video, is the still for the last 3 videos because they all took place at that location. So that way you can see a layout of the property that I'm talking about and kind of get an idea of where I was living at the time. I lived in the farmhouse for 8 years from 87. I moved in when I was 10. Moved out when I was 18 in 95. So throughout the 8 years that I lived there, in this haunted farmhouse that was over 100 years old, I had some things happen to me that I decided to share this year. That way, who knows, if something ever happens to me, at least the stories are out there. If you guys ever want to get in spooky story mode, you can check them out. And I still say that these would make a kick-ass movie, right? If I ever had the money to make a movie out of it, it would be badass. So anyway, I'm gonna skip up to the farmer. So I told you about when we bought the house, my dad was warned or whatever, that people in town thought it was haunted, and that was because the farmer who owned it passed away in one of the barns in like the 40s or 50s. My dad made a name for this guy. I don't know if it was actually his name, but he called him Old Man McAllister. So he'd joke around with us, like, "Ooh, Old Man McAllister." So that's what we all call him. But I don't know if that's his real name. But anyway, so this farmer died, and that creeped out everybody apparently, and the whole place just had a creepy vibe, and it still does. So the first time, I had a couple moments myself where I caught a glimpse of this farmer. They're real quick stories. That's why I kind of wanted to jumble them into this last story, which is fire, fire, fire. So me and my neighbor friend were running out to the barns. It was broad daylight. We ran back to the barns to play like every day. That was pretty much our playground. And it was awesome. It was fun. So, broad daylight, we're not scared. We're walking back to the barns to hang out and play or whatever. And we walked through the largest barn, which is the one that the farmer died in. And we're walking out to the concrete area where they used to like feed and water the pigs, or the cows, because it was a dairy farm. So we walk out to that area, and this is before the barns were rented out to any farmers, so it was still like abandoned barns. Like there was no animals, there was nothing in there, just some old equipment and stuff. So we're walking through the biggest barn, and that leads you out to this big concrete area where they fed the cows. And on our right, there's another huge barn. The barn door, like huge garage door, if you will, was always open. There was old tractors in there, and there was this huge pile of corn that I don't even know how many years it had been there, but there was a huge pile of corn. So me and my friend are walking out to this area and we heard the corn moving. Could be an animal, whatever. But it caught our attention. So, we both looked over because we heard it. And there we saw the farmer in the corn standing. And what I saw personally was overalls. I could see the overalls, like jeans. I saw a red flannel under that, and this was all see-through. Like, it wasn't solid. It was very light and see-through. But you could see the colors, which is really weird. I don't know how these ghosts work and how they do things. But you could see the color. So I could see this faint red flannel. But there was no face. It was like it pretty much stopped at the neck. Like I could see nothing but the neck down. So my friend was witnessing this at the same time. We're both kids. This was before my parents got divorced. So we were kids. I'd put us at like 11 and 12 maybe. So he sees it. We both look at each other and we freak the fuck out. So we ran back to my house and I was just like, oh my God, what did you see? What did you see? And he's like, what do you see? And so like we tell each other, he saw the same exact thing that I saw. He said he's seen the red flannel, the overalls, and no face. So we both seen the same thing. We heard the corn moving enough that it made our heads turn to look. So, I don't know. I mean, is it the actual farmer? I would assume because it looked like what a farmer would wear, But who knows? Like, we can't explain these things. That's why we talk about them. So, that was the first time that I think I saw the farmer in the barns. And like I told you guys in the other stories, I think there were different spirits at this property, like different ones in the house versus what was out in the barns. I always felt that if it was the farmer, whatever that spirit was, I didn't feel like it was any threat, but it just creeps you out. If you see something like that, it's going to creep you out no matter what, because it's not something you see every day and you can't explain it. So it's just weird. So that was the first time. And then the second time, it was actually one of my neighbor kids that seen the farmer. They said they thought it was the farmer. We were all playing out in the barns like always. And they claim that he was up in the top in the loft of one of the barns and they saw him looking out the window at us while we were playing. And this was in the daytime too. I don't know. I didn't happen to see it that day, but I don't not believe them because I know the place was haunted. I lived there. So that happened. The one last barn story that I'll share, it's also pretty quick, but it was really weird. It was like some movie shit. Like, it was really weird. We can't explain it, but whatever, it happened. So this was before my parents were divorced, so my mom was still there, so I wasn't alone in the house yet all the time. So at this particular time, my dad was working second shift, so he got off at like 11. He usually got home around midnight because he worked about an hour from where we lived. And all of our neighbors, this was summertime. We were out of school. It was a beautiful night. I remember, beautiful. All my neighbors would come hang out at my house and wait for my dad to get home because he was just one of those likable people that people like gravitated to. So our house was like the hangout house all the time, even after the divorce, because me and, no adult supervision. So anyway, there were some neighbors over and we were waiting on dad to get home from work and my mom was there and some of the neighbor kids were there, that were like around my age. And we were just hanging out in our front yard, like our side yard. It was by our side porch under this huge shade tree that we always hung out under. But this was at night. We were waiting on dad. to get home, and we were just talking. You know, we're all just having fun and talking. My neighbor Pat was there. She was the Scottish lady I told you guys about that lived across the street. May she rest in peace. You know, and her son rest in peace as well. So they were there, and we started to hear noises out in the barns. It was literally like, for a moment or a few moments, the barns fucking came to life. It was like we heard people working back there. We heard pounds like a hammer. We heard like what sounded like a carriage, you know, maybe that a horse would pull. We heard cows fucking mooing. And there was no cows. There was no animals yet in this property. Nothing. And the thing that we heard that we thought was like a horse carriage was pretty loud, and it was like coming towards our house is what it sounded like. So it was enough to freak us all out, enough to where we literally ran to the road, the furthest away from the barns. We all ran out to the road, and we were looking for my dad's headlights down the road because he was coming. He was going to be there any minute. And literally, and this always seemed to happen with my dad, if any paranormal shit was going on, it would stop if he woke up or got home or whatever, because I don't know, it's just the way it works. So literally, when we see his headlights down the road, that shit stopped. All of it. Silence. Nothing. And we're like, what the fuck was that? You know? And so he gets home, and we're all just kind of stunned. We're all like, what the fuck just happened? Like, what did we just hear? You know? So we told him about it. We're like, oh my God, you know, like we just heard shit out in the barns, like people working, like cows mooing, like it's fucking nuts. And he didn't believe us, of course. He thought we were crazy, and he just joked about it. Was like, "Ooh, Mr. McAllister," you know. I swear to God, that shit fucking happened. I don't know what it was. I cannot explain it, but we all heard it. There was like 5 of us there. Mom's still alive. She would attest to it for me. I don't know what the fuck it was. But it happened. So those are my old man McAllister stories. So now I'm going to get into the last final story of this experience for me living in this house, which is traumatic, was traumatic for me, and it probably shaped a lot of who I am as a person. But it's called Fire, Fire, Fire. So I told you guys in one of the last stories that the realtor had told my dad about the house burnt down like in the 40s or 50s. He made it seem like it was some kind of remodeling accident that happened, you know, no big deal, whatever. I actually didn't know about that until years later. I didn't hear that part of the conversation. I heard him telling my dad that the farmer died, but they like walked off. And I didn't know about it until years later when my neighbor told me, the Scottish lady, and then I verified it with my dad. And he's like, oh yeah, the realtor told me about that. You know, whatever. So in 94 was my very first day of school for my senior year at Buckeye Valley. This all takes place in Ashley, Ohio, a little town in the middle of nowhere. So first day of school, I'll just take you through it as quick as I can and hopefully not get real like emotional. I mean, so anyway, like, you know how kids are, you go school clothes shopping, especially girls, like you're all excited for your first day of school. You're picking out what you're gonna wear. You know, so I remember being up all night figuring out that, like, what am I going to wear the first day? That's a big deal when you're in school. So, you know, I picked an outfit. Dad was working third shift. Like I told you guys, after my parents got divorced, he worked third. I was living there pretty much alone by myself at night from that point on, and he didn't come home very much, and if he was there, he was asleep, during the day. So it's like I lived by myself, as a kid on. So I was by myself. I got myself up for school, and I rode the bus that day. I went to school. I had a shitty car, and I'm sure I didn't drive it for some reason. It was probably acting weird or whatever. So anyway, I took the bus to school. Left early in the morning. Remember I told you guys I was like one of the first kids picked up, last kid dropped off, so it was an hour bus ride. Left for school. Everything was fine. Next thing I know, I don't know, felt like a few hours or so later, I was being called to the principal's office. And I was like freaked out because I didn't know why I would be called to the principal's office on the first day of school. Like, what did I do? So I was nervous. So I go there because like they called me on the PA and shit. Like everybody knew I got called to the office. So I go there, and the principal was like, we got a call from your dad, and there's some kind of an emergency, and you need to go home. He needs you to go home. And I was like, I rode the bus to school, so I don't have a way home. And he's like, well, I talked to this other teacher. She was actually my study hall teacher, and she said she would take you home. And I was like, okay. So how weird is that? Like, my dad, for one, would never, ever send me home from school. This was serious shit. Like, I didn't know what happened. I was thinking the worst. They didn't tell me. They knew, because my dad told them, but they didn't want to tell me for some reason. So, I was thinking somebody died. I thought maybe my mom died, or, someone in the family. Like, I was really thinking the worst. So, like, I'm already crying in her car on the way home. And it's a long ride. I don't live close to school, It's a good ride. Even, like, not on the school bus, it's like 30 minutes, So that's 30 minutes of time to think about this shit. Like, what's going on? I'm 17, So we get to my road, we get to the railroad track, and the teacher grabs my hand and she holds it, and she starts crying, and she's like, I just wanted to tell you that your house is on fire. And so as soon as we get over the railroad tracks, I could see the smoke billowing out of the house. I could see all the fire trucks. I thought, is my dad okay? So, that was my first thought. So, I got out of the car. I'm like, where's my dad? He was in an ambulance. He was okay. He was okay. I said, what happened? He's like, I don't know what happened. He said, I just got home. He's like, I drove. He said he went grocery shopping. He was pulling the driveway and the house is on fire. And we lost everything. Like, there's new clothes I didn't even get to wear. I was 17 and I didn't have a house. I didn't have anything but the clothes on my back. I'll never forget, one of the kids at school brought me a pair of socks. A pair of socks and a toothbrush. And I was so thankful for that. Because I didn't even have a toothbrush. So, I watched the fire department throwing like furniture and stuff out of the house that was on fire and breaking the windows, and it was traumatic because you're like watching everything you have go up in flames, you know. And to see my dad cry, like that was really hard because he worked hard for that house, you know. So I became homeless at 17 years old, the first day of my senior year of high school. My dad had a girlfriend in Worthington that let him come and stay with her, but she didn't welcome me, so I stayed on different people's couches and I slept in my car, and I did that for a few months, you know, before I finally went to my mom's in Columbus and I slept on her couch for a few months. It took 6 months to rebuild our house. So when they rebuilt our house, it was brand new, but it was still the same shell. So like they kept the exterior of the house, and like the basement was the same, you know. And then when they rebuilt it, it was the same floor plan and everything. I did get a bigger closet in my room. But it was all brand new, you know. So when I finally got to go back home, it was like walking in a brand new house. Everything smelled new, you know. But if something like that happens to someone, like, there's things that you can't replace in a fire. You know, you can't replace everything. There's things that you own that are priceless that you'll never get back. So, 6 months is a long time when you're 17 in your senior year of high school to deal with everything I had to deal with, because not only that, I had to work. I had to make my own money. I had to buy my own things. I didn't have any charity, like, besides the socks and the toothbrush. You know, my school didn't give me any kind of charity or anything, and they knew about it. The staff knew what happened. So I really dealt with it alone. And I remember, so when they finally got the fire out the next day, you know, my dad was like, go get some boxes so you can, you know, see if there's anything that you can salvage and keep. So I went to town to this local grocery store where I actually used to work, called Whipple's at the time. It was my first job. I worked at the dairy treat side. It was like a Dairy Queen. So I knew him. Mr. Whipple was my boss, the guy that owned it. And so I came in there and I was like, can I get some boxes for, you know, to see if I can, we're going to see if we can salvage anything. And Mr. Whipple was like, I think your house burned down for a reason. And I was like, what do you mean? You know, I don't know what he meant by that. And I never knew what he meant by that. But he said, I think that something there doesn't want people to live there, is what he told me. And he gave me some boxes, you know, and I went home. And then the fire department said that what caused it was old electrical wiring, which we knew is an issue. I told you guys about the lights always going on and off and all that stuff. And they said the fire started in my dad's room, which was the creepiest room in the house. I told you about that story, and it was the original room of the house. So it was the first room of the house, because it started off as a one-room house, and then they gradually, you know, built onto it over time. So the fire started, weirdly enough, in a wall in my dad's room. The weird thing to me when I thought about it later was the timing of the fire, because had it happened any other fucking time, I would have been killed. I would have died in my sleep from smoke. I would have not got out because if the fire went up through the stairway. It put a complete hole in the stairway, and like I wouldn't have been able to get out. So they said the fire probably started right after I left for school. And if it would have started when my dad got home and went to sleep during the day, he would have probably died in it because he slept through everything. So it's really weird. It's really weird how that happened at the right time where we didn't die in it. But it was still hard. So that was the second fire that happened in 94. It was on the news. There were helicopters flying over, taking video of the fire. I saw it on TV, my house. So that was tough. That was really, really fucking hard time in my life. So that happened. Then after it got rebuilt, it was brand new, and we moved back in, me and my dad. So we moved in February of 95. I graduated in 95, barely fucking graduated because of all the shit I was dealing with. So we moved back in February. Brand new house. Everything is brand new. This house got completely gutted. Completely. And guess what? The lights are still going on and off. Things are still happening at this place. You know, there was one time I had friends over, just real quick, I'll tell, this was in my teen years, so, you know, we were hanging out and having a good time, and all the lights, this was after the rebuild, so this is a brand new house, brand new fucking house, and we were all just watching TV at this time in the living room. It was nighttime, and, you know, of course, my dad was at work, and all the lights went out, the power went out, and all my friends freaked out. They ran out to the front yard, and they were like, I hate your house, and one of them jokingly was like, tell him to turn it back on, Lisa, it's your house, tell him to turn it back on, tell him to turn the lights on, you know. So I did. I was like, okay, turn the lights on, you can turn the lights back on now, and they all came on, like, immediately. It was so fucking weird. So that shit was still going on, even though it was a brand new house. And so in 95, I graduated in May, and like 2 weeks before my 18th birthday, which is May 5th, my dad was like, you gotta find a place to live. I'm selling the house, and you're an adult now. You need to be on your own. So, you know, that's the way I was brought up. So, 2-week notice, I gotta move out. So my dad did, he put the house up for sale, and, of course it sold pretty fast. We ended up selling it to someone that we knew that lived pretty close there, that was young. He was only like 20 or 21. It was his first house. And it was a brand new, nice house at this point, you know. So he bought it, and I want to say maybe 2-3 years later, the craziest fucking thing happened. So it was when I was living with my first roommate in Columbus, and I was watching the news at night, and I saw my house had blown up from a gas leak. Unfortunately, the person that lived in it was in a coma for a while and almost died. And I heard he has burns on like 80% of his body. What are the odds? That's all I have to say. What are the odds of the same fucking house, even after it's brand new, burning down 3 times. 3 times. Like, what are the odds of that? I don't know if the guy that we sold it to had any experiences. I never talked to him. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if shit happened to him. Or if it was just the fire that happened to him. But I do know that he's lucky he survived. And I do know that he refuses, ever since that happened, to sell the property. I knew one of my old neighbors that wanted to buy it from him so he could live by his mom. And he just wouldn't sell it. Won't tear it down, won't sell it. And some of his shit's still in there, like some of his old furniture. And so it's been abandoned since the third fire in either late 90s or early 2000. And it's been abandoned ever since. And he refuses to sell. Why? I don't know. You know, maybe he knows something. I don't know. Maybe he's afraid it'll hurt somebody else, you know? Who knows? But that's the story of the farmhouse that I lived in that was fucking haunted and burned down. Not once, not twice, 3 times. And it's still abandoned. And it's still there. And it's creepy as fuck because it's all grown over and shit. So, that's my stories. Sorry I got a little emotional. I kind of figured I would. It was a tough time in my life. But, you know, I got through it, thankfully. And it, like I said, it shaped me, I think, as a person. To appreciate every single fucking thing I have, down to my toothbrush and a pair of socks. I appreciate that shit. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed my spooky stories that I decided to finally share on the internet. And maybe someday, you know, I'll have someone want to make a movie about them or something. All right, guys. Happy Halloween season. I miss you guys so much. All right, bye.